A cowboy rode into town to buy the strongest horse he could find. But one unexpected meeting changed everything. When he saw a forgotten Apache widow and her young son struggling to survive, he made a choice no one expected. Did he lose money or find something greater? Watch till the end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more emotional stories. The cowboy rode into the dusty Texas town just after sunrise. The streets were already alive with movement. Ranchers examined cattle, merchants called out prices, and horses stamped their hooves. In crowded pens, he had traveled for hours with one clear purpose: to buy the strongest horse his savings could afford. His ranch had expanded over the last year, and the old horses could no longer handle the long workdays. He walked carefully from one stable to another, studying every animal with patience. He checked their legs, looked at their teeth, and asked questions. Several horses impressed him, but none felt right. By late morning, he finally found a large chestnut horse with strong shoulders and calm eyes. The seller proudly explained its speed and endurance. The cowboy counted his money again and realized the horse would cost almost everything he had brought. He stood quietly, thinking about the work waiting for him back home. A better horse could mean faster deliveries and stronger harvest seasons. He was preparing to make the purchase when something unusual caught his attention across the road. Near the edge of the market stood an old wagon, faded by weather and time. Beside it stood a woman and a young boy. The woman wore simple Apache clothing and carried herself with quiet dignity, despite her worn appearance. Her son stayed close to her side and looked tired and hungry. Folded blankets rested in the wagon, carefully arranged as if they were valuable treasures. The woman spoke softly to passing townspeople, offering to trade the blankets for food or supplies. Most people ignored her. A few glanced at her and walked away. Others whispered stories that she had lost her husband during the winter and had been traveling ever since, trying to survive. The cowboy watched her for several moments without moving. He tried to return his attention to the horse, but something kept pulling his eyes back toward the wagon. The boy looked down every time someone refused them. The woman never argued or begged. She simply thanked each person and waited for the next. The cowboy remembered difficult seasons on his own ranch and the people who had once helped him without expecting anything in return. Slowly, he stepped away from the stable. The seller called. After him, thinking he had forgotten something, but the cowboy only shook his head and closed his wallet. He crossed the street and stopped beside the wagon. The woman looked up carefully, expecting another rejection. Instead, the cowboy asked quietly, "What do you need?" She seemed surprised by the question and remained silent for a moment. Then she looked at her son before answering. "Food, maybe work, but more than that, someone to believe. We can start again." The cowboy looked at the blankets, the tired mule, and the determined expression she tried to hide. In that moment, the horse no longer seemed important. He made a decision that neither of them would forget. The cowboy took the money he had saved for months and spent it in ways he had never expected. Instead of leaving town with a powerful horse, he filled a wagon with sacks of flour, dried meat, medicine, tools, and thick blankets. He bought warm clothes for the young boy and supplies that could last several weeks. The Apache widow tried to refuse at first, saying she would repay every dollar. But the cowboy simply said she could earn it through honest work later. Before leaving town, he also paid a local craftsman to help repair the broken wheels of her old wagon. The journey back to the ranch was quiet at first. The boy stayed close to his mother and watched the cowboy, carefully, unsure whether this kindness would disappear like promises before. When they reached the ranch, the cowboy showed them a small cabin that had not been used in years. It needed cleaning, but it was dry and safe. The widow thanked him and immediately began organizing the space. The next morning before sunrise, she was already outside helping carry water and repair old tools. She worked without complaint and accepted only what she truly needed. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the ranch began to feel different. The widow had skillful hands and repaired clothing, cooked meals, and helped organize. Supplies better than anyone the cowboy had hired before. Her son, who had once stayed silent, slowly changed too. He explored the fields, learned how to care for animals, and laughed again while chasing chickens around the yard. The cowboy noticed small changes every day. The cabin no longer looked empty. Evening meals became conversations instead of silence. For the first time in a long while, the ranch felt less like work and more like a home. One evening, as the sun painted the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold, the cowboy and the widow worked together, repairing a fence near the western field. After a long silence, she placed the hammer down and looked at him. "You gave up your horse for strangers," she said quietly. "Why?" The cowboy rested his arms on the fence and looked across the land he had spent years building. Then he smiled and answered, "A good horse helps a man ride farther, but helping people gives the journey meaning." The widow lowered her eyes and stood silently for several moments. The wind moved gently through the grass, while the boy played nearby, his laughter carrying across the field.
"Finally,"
she spoke softly. "Then maybe fate brought you to town for something greater." The cowboy did not answer right away. He simply looked at the ranch and realized something unexpected. He had gone to buy strength for his work, but instead he had brought life back into a place that had become lonely. He never bought that horse, and years later he still called it the best deal he ever missed.